I want you all to go on a journey with me back through time. And to do this, take this trip, I need you to close your eyes. Close your eyes for a moment, and I want you to imagine that you live in a world where there is no such thing as Facebook. You live in a world where there's no such thing as email. These things don't exist because the internet does not exist. The cell phone does not exist. There's no interstate highway system. There's no cars. There's no Whole Foods. There's no Walmart. In fact, all of you live in a rural farming community along the eastern seaboard of the North American coast. Now, please open your eyes. I'd like to reintroduce myself. The year is 1775, and I am King George III of England. And as it stands, you are all my subjects, and I control every aspect of your lives. I set and collect your taxes. I make your laws. If I so choose, I can tell you who can own property. I appoint your governors. And if I'm really feeling like a busybody, I can tell you who you can and cannot marry. Now, this is fair, right? I may live across the ocean, but you're my subjects. I'm going to make the decisions that are best for you and your community and the colonies. Do you like this? No, you didn't like it. But what are you going to do about it? You've got families, you've got lives to lead. You're not going to give all of that up in your day-to-day lives to give it up and be hung for treason for some elusive idea called self-determination. Or even more loosely defined, freedom. Are you? But you did, didn't you? 1776, you declared independence from me, your king. In the War of Independence, 25,000 of your neighbors and friends die fighting for this loose idea called self-determination. Now, the war ends with the Treaty of Paris, and I am no longer your king. The United States of America is born. It's a free country now, right? Everyone has a say, everybody counts. No, just men. And not just any men, just white men. And while we're being specific, not just white men who own property. So if you're in this room, if you're a white man and you own property, please stand up. Please stand up. These are the men who are making all the decisions in your community, in your lives. Now stay seated. Stay standing for just a few minutes. This just takes a few minutes. So these men might be wise, they might be sage, they're business owners, they're rich, unless they inherited it. But do you trust them to make all the decisions in your life? No. How long did this power structure of this elite few making all the decisions last in the free country that is the United States? 20 years? 30 years? No. 80 years until the breakout of the Civil War. 80 years, these few men making all the decisions. Civil War breaks out. Over 620,000 Americans die. Please remain standing. Fighting, just for a few moments. 620,000 Americans die fighting each other for what? Power, self-determination. Who has it and who does not? Civil War ends, and the 15th Amendment gives everyone the right to vote, right? No, it's still just men. But property rights no longer matter. So if you're a man and you're over 21, you're an American citizen, please stand and join the exclusive ranks of the voting public. Now we're getting more fair. Now we're your uncles, your brothers, your sons. We're going to look after you, right? We're going to make all the decisions. This is fair. Women in the audience, what do you think? Well, how long did this power structure remain in place? 20 years? 30? No, women had to rally, mobilize, organize, and fight. But not for 30 years, not for 40 years. Women had to fight for 72 years until the 19th Amendment finally gives women the right to vote in 1920. So ladies, please stand up and join the exclusive ranks if you're over 21 and you're an American citizen. So we're getting there, right? Things are getting more fair. But let me ask black Americans in the room. You technically have the right to vote, the 15th and 19th Amendments, but did you have the power to vote? No. In large parts of the country, voting is so potent, so powerful, people will actively keep you from it. Voting, things like literacy tests, voting rights laws, poll taxes. No, it wasn't until the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act especially that gave you the power to vote, backed up by the protections of the U.S. federal government. This is critical. So we're getting there. But we're still in the mid-1960s in this time machine. And what's happening at the time? We're fighting in Southeast Asia, right? How did we get soldiers to fight? With the draft. So you're telling me you've got to be 18 to fight and die for your country on the other side of the world, but you've got to be 21 to have a say in who's making those decisions? Is that fair? Well, people being drafted at the time didn't think it was fair either. And they worked with Congress, and they rallied, and they passed the 26th Amendment, 1971, lowering the voting age from 21 to 18. So here we are. Regardless of race, creed, gender, as long as you're 18, U.S. citizen and not a felon, you have the power to vote and have a say in your community. This is the democracy generations have fought and died for. This is a truly free country. Thank you. Have a seat. So, a few years ago, a colleague of mine, Walt Towns, and I developed this program, this kind of interactive history lesson, and we took it to high schools around the country for a couple of years, trying to talk to high school seniors who are turning 18 or 18, getting them to really feel the power of their vote. What was the blood spilled to get this vote into everyone's hands? And we did this mock election as part of this interactive history lesson. I don't have time to do that here today, but I want to share with you this extraordinary transformation I experienced in every one of these classrooms. So we'd run a mock election. I'd ask 2 or 3 students to run for president of the United States. They'd come up to the front of the class, and I give them 2 minutes to make a stump speech to their classmates. Say, why should we vote for you? What do you stand for? You got 2 minutes. And you'd be surprised, some of these kids could really come up with some amazing speeches. So they make their case. What do they believe in? What would they do for their students? And we're about to have a vote, but I interrupt. I said, I'm sorry, this 40% of the class can't vote. You just can't vote. I don't tell you why. And you can imagine they're pretty upset about it. We just came through the whole voting history, but they can't vote. And I actually physically moved about 40% of the class, just a few paces off to the side of the room. And then I break out candy bars. And I give handfuls of candy bars to each of my 3 candidates. And I say, you can hand these out to anyone you want in the room, no strings attached. And they do. They hand out candy bars. So you want a candy bar? Candy bar? Candy bar in the back? One more? So they hand out these candy bars. Here, you want a candy bar? There you go. They hand out these candy bars, and we have a vote, and we tally the votes, and we have a winner. Congratulations, new president. But before I let them sit down, I say, I noticed that you only handed out candy bars to those students that you knew were going to vote in a few minutes. And I see some of you nodding already, just like these students were nodding. Now, do you think this happens in real life? What do you think these candy bars represent? We know the answer, right? They represent things like stand-on positions, infrastructure projects for jobs. They represent what's in the budget, what's not in the budget, policy positions. Candidates hand out these things in return for votes. Now, the second question is equally as important. Do candidates know who votes and who does not vote? Yes, they know exactly who votes. They don't know how you vote, but they know if you vote. They know where you live, they know what party you're registered with, and they know how many times in how many elections you voted. Now, I'm in marketing. When I need to do a demographic profile, I dig up public records that are free to the public. I can find out where people live, what they're registered to, and how many elections they voted. Now, if I'm a campaign manager, it's not what I do for a living, but if I was, and I got to get X candidate elected, am I going to spend my limited time and resources talking to those people that I know aren't going to vote? Why? Because I can have all the money in the world, I can run all the ads, I can have the biggest super PAC, but without votes, I cannot win. And that's the beauty of our democracy. We, the people, have power in our votes, and we take that power and we invest it in candidates in exchange for things we believe in. And then every few years, that we get the chance to take that power back and give it to somebody else if they're not delivering. It's an amazing thing to realize that we have the power to bloodlessly and peaceably overthrow our government every few years. And not all of us are using this power. So, that was this program. But why am I here? Why do I care? Why am I up on this stage? Why was I traveling around the country talking to high school kids? Why have I been an activist and put my face and name in the public to be personally attacked for what I have to say when people don't want to take me on what I'm saying, they take me on as a person? Why do I care so much? Well, it comes down to my parents. And long before I was born, they grew up in World War II and post-World War II Europe. My mother grew up in a country called Slovenia, which was part of Yugoslavia. And when the war broke out, the Nazis literally invaded and lined my mother's family and her against the wall with machine guns. Thankfully, they didn't pull the trigger. But when the Nazis left, the communists took over. And my mother and her family spent decades living without so many basic economic, religious, personal freedoms we take for granted every day. My father grew up in Italy, also post-war, bombed out buildings, very little access to economic opportunity, very little political power. They both emigrated to this country determined to live free and pursue their dream. Now, they didn't meet in Europe. They met in English class in Jersey, but that's a whole other TED Talk. Or a screenplay, I haven't decided. But they came here, and they were just so passionate. They became citizens, and they raised 3 kids, worked full-time. They didn't have time to go to town hall meetings and run for office, and English wasn't their first language, so maybe they weren't comfortable speaking in public. But where they didn't want to speak up publicly, they always expressed their power in the privacy of the voting booth. And they always took me with them. And they always raved about this power, how rare it is, how precious it is. And it is. A republic is far from guaranteed. It takes work. And it's an anomaly in human history. It is. Look through human history. A democracy, a republic, it's a rare thing. And we have that power. And it pisses me off when people aren't using it. And we're not. In the last presidential election, more than 40% of Americans registered did not vote. And the presidential is when most people vote. Right? And these are the people who are registered. There are millions of people who are not registered that don't have a say. They do not count. And all the while, our politics becomes more partisan. Poll after poll says it's broken. People don't feel part of the process. They feel alienated. They feel it's rigged for the moneyed, the powerful, and the elite. And it is. But I am up here also with solutions. I'm more of a solution guy, really. We have the power to fix this, and it doesn't take a single new law or a constitutional amendment to fix. And of course, I'm going to say voting. But I'm not letting you off the hook that easy. Not just voting. Voting in local elections is key. So think about it. The White House, president in the White House makes policy, kind of guides policy. He doesn't make laws, guides policy. He definitely deals with foreign policy. But he's not fixing the potholes on your street. Congress has more power. They're dealing with budgets, the can and can'ts, the do's and don'ts. But they're not spending the time making sure your town is spending the resources to find the right teachers to teach your kids. They're not making decisions to invest in infrastructure so your commute's better with public or roads, public transit or roads. That's governors, mayors, city councils. These people have more power on your day-to-day life than anybody ever does in Washington. And we spend all our time, it's almost like a sideshow in the media talking about Washington. Meanwhile, nobody's showing up for these local races. Here's the second key, voting in the primaries. This is even more important. Primaries have become these partisan cookpots of craziness. But listen to this. Now, I'm exaggerating a little, but primaries are the elections before the elections, right? They are where the parties fight it out and then they battle each other at the general. But more districts around the country, cities and states, are becoming one-party dominant. So whoever wins that primary will win the general. It's not a contest. It's a coronation. Let's look at Texas. In 2014, 14% of registered voters showed up in the primary. And that person who won the primary won the general. In Indiana, it was 12% of voters. And if that was a tight contest, maybe 6%, 7% are deciding who the 100% of us have to live with. And what do these people need to win? Re-election or election? They need votes. But who's voting for them? Maybe this group of people right here. That's it. That's who they need to convince to keep their seat because they know they'll win the general election. And ideologues know this. Now, don't get me wrong. Ideologues have an important place in our democracy. They inform the debate. They push and pull progress. But when the rest of us stay out of it, they own the debate. And the rest of us who are hungry for practical solutions are left wondering where all the statesmen and women have gone. They're gone because they cannot win these primaries because not everyone is voting. Only the hardcore party politics are voting in the primary. So you need to be voting every election. Use your power. Democracy, it just takes work. The children are not the future of this country. We are. We, the people. You have that power. Use that power. You and me. Let's get busy. Thank you.